Asbestos. We've all heard a lot about it, but what exactly is asbestos? Asbestos is a mineral with some unusual characteristics. Asbestos has so many positive qualities that some people call it a miracle material. It is fireproof, heat-resistant, lightweight, resistant to most chemicals, bacteria-resistant, sound-absorbing, and it doesn't conduct electricity. Products that contain asbestos can be very helpful, but they can also be very harmful. Asbestos has hidden dangers that you need to know about. While most rocks break down into tiny particles like grains of sand, asbestos breaks down into small fibers like strands of rope. These fibers can be so small that they're invisible to the human eye. In fact, you would need a very powerful microscope to see them. But even though asbestos fibers are tiny, they have the strength of steel. One of the problems in dealing with asbestos fibers is that you can't see them, taste them, or smell them. But they are there, and if the fibers enter your body, they can cause severe damage. Before the dangers of asbestos were fully known, asbestos was used throughout the building and construction industry. It was mixed into plaster and wallboard for strength and support, sprayed onto walls, ceilings, and steel girders for fireproofing, wrapped around pipes, boilers, heating ducts, and other utility systems for insulation. You can even find asbestos in floor and ceiling tiles. So if you're a member of a custodial, engineering, or maintenance staff, you need to know about the hazards of working around asbestos. In fact, the hazards of asbestos fibers are so serious that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, has issued a standard to train, monitor, and protect workers who could be exposed to asbestos on the job. As a part of this training, you'll learn the health effects and risks of long-term asbestos exposure, how to recognize and deal with possible asbestos hazards, and the content of your facility's asbestos management plan. One of the problems with working around asbestos is that the fibers can float in the air for long periods of time and can easily be inhaled. Asbestos fibers caught in your lungs can cause severe damage. You won't experience any immediate side effects, but this damage can lead to a disease known as asbestosis. And asbestosis can cause shortness of breath, enlargement of the heart, in extreme cases, even death. Long-term exposure to asbestos fibers can also lead to the abnormal growth of cells known as cancer. Asbestos fibers are especially hazardous to people who smoke. Cigarette smoke breaks down the lungs' defense system and leaves the lungs vulnerable to the harmful fibers. As a result, smokers are over 50 times more likely to become sick after long-term exposure to asbestos. Knowing how dangerous it can be, you might ask, how can I reduce my chances of exposure to asbestos? To start, you need to know where you might encounter asbestos in your work areas, how to recognize potential problems, and what to do if you find damaged asbestos materials. If there are any asbestos materials in your workplace, your facility will have put together an asbestos management plan. You'll find a list of these materials in that plan. There should also be a sign or a label at each location to warn you about materials that contain asbestos. If there isn't a sign where you think asbestos may be present, notify your supervisor. In general, the asbestos materials that you'll come across fit into two categories, friable and non-friable. If an asbestos material is friable, it can be easily damaged or broken apart. When this happens, dangerous fibers can be released into the air. Non-friable materials can also release asbestos fibers, but they are not damaged as easily. The three most common materials that contain asbestos are thermal system insulation, floor tiles, and sprayed-on materials. Thermal system insulation is the most common type of friable asbestos material. It is often found on boilers, utility pipes, ductwork, and heating systems. Be on the lookout for possible problems with this material. Even a small tear in the insulation is a potential hazard. If you encounter damaged insulation, minimize the chance of asbestos exposure by acting immediately. Even if you aren't sure the material contains asbestos, Secure the area if possible and post a sign warning people not to enter. Then notify the appropriate people so that they can deal with the problem. This might be your supervisor, your facility's environmental manager, or an outside company. If they can't fix the situation immediately, you may be asked to temporarily patch the damaged area. Before starting the work, put on the appropriate protective equipment, including gloves, a respirator, and disposable overalls. Then wrap the damaged material with strong plastic and secure it with duct tape. The professionals will find a more permanent solution. When they arrive, make sure to keep clear and let them do their work. But remember, never handle or remove any asbestos material unless you're authorized and properly equipped. If asbestos material needs to be removed before you can do your work, talk to your supervisor and find out who in your facility is qualified to handle it. Another place you may find asbestos is right under your feet. Floor tiles can contain asbestos. So can its mastic, the glue used to stick the tiles to the ground. Although floor tiles are a non-friable material, they can still release fibers if damaged. Look for cuts, grooves, or cracks in the material. These can all be signs of potential asbestos exposure. If you notice any damage to floor tiles, seal off the area and notify your supervisor. Because they may contain asbestos, you also don't want to grind, cut, or break apart floor tiles. This could release asbestos fibers. If you need to strip a floor's finish, use wet methods. Dampen the floor so asbestos fibers are less likely to become airborne and more likely to remain on the ground. Once the surface is adequately wet, use a low abrasion pad at speeds of less than 300 RPM for the safest cleaning. Ceiling tiles may also contain asbestos. Be careful when changing light bulbs or replacing ceiling tiles. Look for broken corners or other damaged areas. These are signs that the tile might be releasing asbestos fibers into the air. Asbestos materials can also be found sprayed on ceilings and walls. These are friable materials and must be handled with extreme caution. One of the problems with sprayed-on materials is that they can peel away from the surfaces they're applied to. The dust and debris that results could contain asbestos fibers. If you encounter this type of debris, do not sweep or shovel it while it is dry. This will cause asbestos fibers to be stirred up into the air where they can be inhaled. Report the problem to your supervisor, who will arrange to have the material cleaned up and disposed of. Depending on the job you do, you may be asked to assist in the repair or removal of asbestos at your facility. If you get involved in this type of work, make sure you use the proper protective gear. Although asbestos isn't a skin contact hazard, by wearing disposable overalls, your decontamination will be much easier. You will also need to wear a respirator fitted with special filters that will prevent you from inhaling asbestos fibers. The respirator must be the right size and shape for your face, otherwise it will not properly protect you. That's why fit testing will be necessary. If you have any gaps between your face and the mask, asbestos fibers could leak through. Once you've got a good fit, you'll be trained to clean and maintain your respirator, as well as how and when to change your filters. When cleaning up any asbestos materials, never use an ordinary vacuum. Even a shop-grade vacuum will send fibers into the air. Vacuums used for asbestos cleanup must be fitted with special HEPA filters. These high-efficiency particulate filters will prevent the release of asbestos fibers into the air. Remember to use wet methods during cleanup activities whenever necessary. Make sure the asbestos material is wet before, during, and after handling, even if you're using a HEPA vacuum. After any asbestos cleanup, you should wet wipe the area with a damp cloth. This further reduces the amount of asbestos fibers that can become airborne. When you're done, your cloth will contain asbestos fibers. Be sure to dispose of it properly. As part of the cleanup process, asbestos materials must be properly bagged and labeled. Use only official asbestos disposal bags for this purpose. When labeling a bag, use a generator label that lists the name of your facility and its address. If an asbestos disposal bag becomes torn, seal it immediately with tape. Then place the damaged bag inside a new bag and reseal it. Put a generator label on the new outer bag. And remember, asbestos is a regulated waste. You can't just put it in the trash. It must be hauled to a licensed landfill. While you're helping with cleanup activities, you might also be asked to wear an air sampling device to assist with air monitoring. This will help determine the airborne asbestos concentration in your work area and what may need to be done to protect you. To collect the air samples, an air pump will be strapped to your waist, and a sampling cassette will be taped to the front of your shoulder. After you turn the cassette in, the air sample will be analyzed for asbestos content. After any work with asbestos materials, you must decontaminate yourself and your equipment. This prevents the spread of dust and debris that might contain asbestos fibers. Always use an official decontamination area. It will be equipped with a HEPA vacuum as well as a plastic drop cloth to contain any loose asbestos fibers. Never eat, drink, or smoke in these decontamination areas or any other asbestos area. This increases your chance of inhaling asbestos fibers. When decontaminating your clothing, never brush off dust or debris. This will send asbestos fibers into the air. Instead, use the HEPA vacuum to remove these materials from your clothing before you take it off. You'll also need to vacuum off your equipment and the asbestos disposal bags. Remember, your overalls will be contaminated with asbestos fibers and must be disposed of as a regulated waste. Seal them up in an asbestos disposal bag. Washing up after handling anything hazardous is always a good idea, and asbestos is no exception. Scrub your hands and face thoroughly with soap and water before leaving work. In fact, you should shower before leaving work if possible. If you can't, be sure to shower immediately when you get home. This way, you won't expose your family or friends to asbestos fibers. To provide an additional safeguard against asbestos exposure, you may be asked to participate in a medical surveillance program. This program will make certain that you aren't being exposed to dangerous amounts of asbestos. It will also verify that it's safe for you to wear a respirator if you ever need one. A surveillance program requires regular doctor visits, where you may take a breathing capacity test or have x-rays taken of your lungs. These will be done free of charge. If you have any questions about the medical surveillance program, ask your supervisor. Asbestos may be a hidden danger in your workplace, but it's not hard to find ways to protect yourself. Know where asbestos materials are located. Check your facility's asbestos management plan. Inspect all asbestos locations at least twice a year. Record the results of these inspections in an asbestos logbook for future reference. Don't disturb asbestos materials unless it's absolutely necessary. Take steps to prevent contamination during cleanup activities. And always remember to decontaminate after coming into contact with any asbestos material. By being aware of the hazards associated with asbestos, you can reduce your chances of exposure and help to make your workplace a safer place.